Digital music. Trends. Digital music. Trends. Digital music. Trends. Digital music. Trends.
This is Digital Music Trends, episode 105, recorded on the 12th of October 2012. So hello everyone and welcome to Digital Music Trends. Today we have another really full episode with lots of stories that happened in the past week, and to discuss it here with me are Darren Hemmings, who is founder of digital marketing consultancy Motive Unknown. So hi Darren, and thanks for joining us once again.
Hello.
And we have Stephen O'Reilly, who is the Director of International Sales at Mobile Roadie. So hi Stephen, and thanks for joining us.
Hello, sir.
How's it going? All good?
All good, thanks. Yourself?
All right, not bad. So lots of stuff happening this week, and I don't even know where to start. I think I'm going to just start with Deezer just to get that out of the way. So the story is that Deezer has raised a new round of funding worth about $130 million that will go into the global expansion of the company. And the announcement was made earlier this week, and it's led by the Access Industries group. This is a US company that is led by Len Blavatnik, which I can't really pronounce, but basically it's the owner of Warner Music Group, and they purchased Warner Music Group in 2011. So basically there's a shift here of Deezer going from being an entity that is very cozy with companies like Orange, for example, to Orange actually selling off their 11% share in Deezer, which is part of why the $130 million sum was put into place, and a major label actually becoming a lot more involved into the history and the development of the company. So first of all, that's a really great thing to have somebody else that's coming into the market that is a really good second place after Spotify, so that Spotify doesn't have a complete monopoly over the streaming market. And second thing, interesting strategy that they've avoided the US so far. So what do you guys make of this round, Darren? Do you think that it's a good thing that Deezer is in second place, and do you feel that there's anybody else in the streaming services that can even remotely get near to Spotify and Deezer in terms of placing right now?
I mean, I think it is a good thing. It can only be a good thing. I mean, I think, as we've touched upon in a previous podcast, monopolies are never a particularly good thing for anyone. And as we saw with iTunes, they certainly went from being a more humble trade partner, I suppose, to being a dominant one, and therefore in a position to somewhat dictate terms. I mean, I think which isn't a slight on iTunes. I just think any company that grows to a certain level inevitably is in a position to push their own agenda more. It's a natural facet of business. So I just think having more players in the game is a very, very healthy thing, and won't hurt anyone. I think it's quite interesting that it's Warner's who are kind of in there, because historically they've always been the holdout.
Yeah.
When any deals are done, when the YouTube deals were done, to monetize video content, they were the last to the table and negotiated a quite aggressive strategy there. Which, I mean, at the time, I think everyone attacked them for being, slow on the uptake. But when you look at what they actually got out of it and the way in which they've leveraged that platform to their advantage, in hindsight, I think they actually did it pretty well. So, I mean, I think it's a good thing. I'll be interested to see what happens. I think being in the UK, it's a bit of an odd one, because certainly here, Deezer is not really a dominant, player.
Yeah.
I mean, I must admit, I was reading about this earlier and saw they got 2 million subscribers to Spotify's 4. And I thought they were nowhere near that figure.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting to see that they've managed this. In terms of other players, though, I mean, Audio is still there. Like, I'm a huge fan of Audio. I think it's probably a superior product of the three. I actually, just as an experience to use it, it's very much kind of Apple to Spotify's Microsoft, you could argue, in that sense of being very product led, and being a good experience that makes you want to use it. Now, at the moment, I would say they're probably not in a position to compete on this level. But if there's sort of rumors pinging about at the moment that Microsoft might look to buy them, or
Yeah.
they might look to sell to Microsoft. And obviously, if that's the case, then that could be a real game changer, because clearly, Microsoft have got a whole ecosystem that they need to feed, including, the kind of Xbox media center type position they've got. And as a consequence, I would imagine, they would play a pretty hard game to try and break that market. So again, though, that would be a good thing. I think competition is always healthy. It always benefits, and around the industry at the moment, I would think that's a good thing. And I mean, perversely, I would think even Spotify potentially welcome this in a weird way, because it might take some of the heat off of them. So yeah, overall, thumbs up from me.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad to see, Deezer was I was surprised it was such a large round. It's serious money. So obviously they mean to do business.
Absolutely.
I'm guessing a lot of those figures that Darren is referring to, like the only way that I kind of have come across Deezer here in the UK is through like being bundled in with subscriptions to network providers. So I'm guessing that's a serious amount of those installs, especially in the UK, because that's when they first kind of got a bit of airplay. Really, I think it's with I can't remember the network provider, but that's been huge. It will be interesting to see for me. Like I've been happy with the way Spotify have been trying to build on their platform. All these different apps that they're doing. So like, everyone's going to have to try and play catch up and innovate as well and build on top. So because for me, I'm a Spotify user and lover, and so I need a reason to go to Deezer.
Absolutely.
On the mobile aspect of things, I think from playing with all the different mobile apps, or from all the different providers, I think Deezer need a bit of work to do on their mobile product. If you go in and look at the feedback in the iTunes App Store, from users of the Deezer app, there's a lot of confusion, and like the feedback's not great. But Spotify is remarkably high, 5 stars consistently, and there's a real kind of love for Spotify, from anyone that goes and gives them feedback. So I think Deezer have a lot of work to do with the mobile client, but welcome addition, and hopefully it will kind of like just make streaming more popular and more legitimized, and we'll see more innovation.
Yeah, and there's a question of profitability as well. I mean, the interesting thing about Deezer is a company that has avoided the US market so far, because it does have a freemium model, a bit like, it's probably the only other streaming service that provides a similar service to Spotify, in the sense that users can access the service for free by listening to some advertising. So there's an interesting issue about profitability, because they've avoided the US market, which means that they have less users that are on the free service, so they have to they have less royalties owed as well, in terms of having to offset losses with profits of subscriptions. And one of the interesting things is that, though, of course, the US market is the biggest digital music market. There was an article on Billboard that pointed out that the US market has a trade value had a trade value of 2.21 billion in 2011, and that's projected to be 3.24 billion in 2015. And that subscription services now only have just a 6% share of revenue as of 2011, and if they manage to grow that share to 30%, that would be worth almost $1 billion. So that's huge amounts of money. That's a huge play there. So it's interesting that they've held out from the US, which has helped in terms of the avoiding massive losses, but at the same time, they need to get into the market if they really want a big piece of the digital music pie, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be difficult. I mean, it's so hard, because I'm seeing the same thing around the Spotify financial stuff that's come out in the last 7 days, and was reading some interesting analysis this morning of that was basically saying you're looking at this over the 12 months that they pretty much launched in the US, and that's led them to hemorrhage cash. So it's a necessary evil, I think. And if these are at some point, I would imagine they're going to have to do this to break that market, and that's the point at which suddenly their financial situation will look significantly less rosy. So it's an interesting one because I think maybe they're building their models elsewhere before then going into the USA.
Yeah.
And that's, it makes sense, but at some point they're still going to have to take that hit if they really want to compete, particularly because, as you pointed out, they've got this freemium model and they're unlikely to gain much traction without it. And of course, in the meantime, many other music services are making great headway in the USA. So it's kind of, if you're coming in very late to that table, you're really playing catch up. So, yeah, I'm not sure of the, I think it's a really tricky market to crack, right? But I'm not sure that delaying it is going to help, because at some point it would just make the task all the harder.
Yeah, and Stephen, I was going to say you're aware of the US market, of course. Mobile Roadie has got a huge presence there. It's based in the US, so you probably have a good idea of how important it is to have a stronghold in the US as a company.
Absolutely, yeah. Like we're born and raised in LA, but like we opened our London office 3 years ago. Deezer got to get there. Like we've seen if you turn it around, like how difficult it is for audio, to enter the UK market. Like they only really got in here this year, and so like Spotify had a 2-year or 1 year, 18-month head start. So they own it right now, and it's going to be like you can flip it for Deezer in the States, and then you've got other great subscription services like Mog as well. Over there. Absolutely.
Okay, let's move swiftly on. Keeping on to subscription services, just talk briefly about the fact that yesterday Spotify announced a partnership with Samsung on their smart TVs, so that their new models of smart TVs from Samsung are going to come with Spotify pre-installed. And so users are going to have access to a free trial. I think it's going to be comparable to the trial that you could get online if you went on Spotify right now. But they're going to be encouraged, of course, to subscribe. I think that's absolutely paramount. So stuff like that is stuff that's going to propel subscription forward in the mainstream. At the same time, I'm a little bit worried that people that purchase smart TVs are going to start feeling a little bit spammed by all these different services that are pre-installed on their TVs, and then encourage them to try and subscribe. I'm sure there's a lot of TVs that come with Netflix, that come with Love Film, they come with all sorts of different subscription services on there. Do you have the same concern? Do you feel like it's going to be difficult to convince people to purchase something that comes within their box, or is it just a positive thing overall? And my concerns are crazy.
I think no. I mean, I think it's a relatively valid concern that you don't want TVs to turn into the new Windows laptops where you'd buy any
exactly, that's what I was thinking about.
Dell machine and just get it festooned with kind of crapware that made the whole thing run badly. I mean, certainly that's a going concern, but there's no avoiding the fact that I think these models where you get the bundled free trial and everything to at least trial Spotify can only really be a good thing. I mean, I think this is where the battle needs to be won. Spotify, as many have pointed out, has kind of won over music fans at the moment, and tech geeks. So it's no shock that the three of us are quite well versed with streaming music services. But tie you with a brush there, Mr. O'Reilly. But yeah, the fact that we're all using them is great. But really, it's kind of like when your nan is using them. I think is probably the point at which it's really arrived. And when people are, but just you need to win over man in supermarket, and that at the moment I don't think is really happening, if I'm totally honest, and kind of sales figures would suggest that, and everything else, that, I mean, we forget, as I was saying, on a panel recently, that, if you look at the UK chart, certainly sales are still, generally speaking, 60 to 70% CDs, so in a world where we're talking about streaming services, man in the street generally is, the majority are still buying a physical format. Yeah. So, we're far from winning these battles. They haven't kind of culturally cut through, I don't think. And by placing them on TVs and other devices, I think it at least gives people the chance to trial it and see what they make of it. Because I just think otherwise a lot of these people just aren't getting exposure to these things in the same way as, Steve mentioned with the sort of Deezer bundling in with mobile devices. At least then people got aware of the concept, and maybe they wouldn't have continued subscribing, but they at least had a go. And I think that's really, really important at the moment to kind of get the cut through to, man in street, or however you turn them.
Yeah.
I've a kind of personal, dissatisfaction with connected TVs at the moment. I invested in one about 9 months ago, in a Samsung, and I just find them like terribly clunky, super slow, not fit for purpose, and the user interface is like absolutely awful. So I think there's like we've a whole way to go with connected TVs. Like the current apps that are on there that are bundled in, like the majority of them are awful.
Yeah.
Um,
And just to ask you, you can't uninstall apps from there. They're just there permanently, right?
yeah, they're bundled in. There are app stores for the different manufacturers, but like even all those different, it's a fragmented marketplace. Like Samsung have their own software, Sony have their own, Panasonic have their own. It's a nightmare. So I don't want to sound like an Apple fanboy, but I reckon when Apple, make some kind of move on TV, or be that on like from the iPad to control the TV experience, like currently it's really awful, and there's a whole ton of work to be done. Like it's just I would not use Spotify on my TV currently because the user interface, I could just imagine how awful it would be.
Yeah.
So it needs work. The guys at Sonos, actually, in an interesting comparison, they've done some great work with their like iPad and mobile apps.
Yeah.
To bundle in all these different services. So for me, they're kind of a good example of how you can actually, bring multiple services to one device, or a device with a great experience.
Yeah.
And like, I think that will be increasingly, the benchmark.
Yeah. And hopefully there's going to be some polarization between what people do, manufacturers do on the TVs, like it happens in mobile phones. Before every single manufacturer had their own operating system, and now there's a polarization between what's Android and iOS, and perhaps Windows when it comes into play properly. So maybe there's going to be a polarization where manufacturers are going to start using Google's software in the background, which was going to bring a little bit more consistency to the experience. Hopefully.
I live in hope. I mean, I don't know. I like Android. No, I mean, actually, I don't like Android in some respects. It just drives me insane because of the fragmentation. But I like that it's there and competing, because without it, I think the marketplace would be all the worse. But I do wish that it would get a slightly more singular line as regards, the interface and what can be done there, because when it's good, it's very good. I mean, I bought an Nexus 7 tablet for that reason, just to kind of muck about with and see what Android looked like in 2012, because the last time I'd used it was about 3-4 years ago, before I decamped to iPhones and the world of Apple, But and I like it as an experience. So I think it could be very good. But yeah, it needs to fix the fragmentation problem. But at least if you can get some consistency. I mean, it almost feels a bit slightly comical to me that we live in a world where, a lot of these devices don't run a kind of singular operating system, because it strikes me as just the most obvious thing in the world, that, I've got a Freeview box that evidently runs some kind of Linux, and you're sort of looking at it thinking, well, it could do all of these things, but it just doesn't, because they just decided to build their own OS. So yeah, certainly polarizing onto one consistent platform would be a lovely step forward.
Definitely.
But yeah, I mean, I think Steve raises an interesting point as well about Sonos, and I mean, it's a funny one. I don't know about you guys, but like my TV is not wired up to my big stereo. I kind of got the TV over here and the stereo over there. So if you put Spotify on my telly, in fact, I've got Spotify on Xbox Media Center as well as audio. But I don't use them on the TV because it's just not where the speakers are, So it's not the place to listen. And I kind of wonder for how many people that also applies.
Yeah, I guess.
So on a side note, I'd be curious to see how many people would install it on a Samsung TV and then just sort of say, well, this isn't where I play music. I play it on my stereo.
And on the other hand, you have the other side of the argument, whereby a lot of mainstream people are using their surround sound system as their main speakers for music as well, because they don't have a separate system for music anymore. So if you buy a really good surround sound system for cinema or for DVDs, then you just use that to listen to music as well, because you just put CDs in there, you just plug in your MP3 player. So that's the other side of a coin. Like, the majority of people actually buy standalone speakers for listening to music anymore?
I suspect. I don't know, really. I mean, I think convenience drives everything. It's fun. Like, even my dad, who's a total audiophile, has got like the full bells and whistles kind of setup, and he, crazy high end, and then he kind of discovered Spotify, which, until only a year ago, the streaming quality certainly was not kind of audiophile levels. It was not your full on CD or vinyl experience. It was kind of 256k MP3 thereabouts, and And just because of the sheer convenience of it, he's quite happy now to use that. And I think he uses the extreme setting, but the point was more that peeling back 12 months, he was using it quite voraciously even then,
Yeah.
and was happy with the fact that it wasn't the best audio quality. And I think it was a perfect example of where just convenience is king.
Yeah.
So maybe, that I'm wrong, and that if people are sat there going, you know what, I've got a half decent speaker set on my TV, now I've got Spotify on it, I'm good with that.
Works for me, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on from talking about legal music services to kind of halfway legal music services or questionably legal music services. So this week, the proper sort of trial for the Redigi case has started. So if you're not familiar with that, Redigi is a company that in the US is setting out to resell digital music that you own. So it's an interesting angle to see whether there's the option of, once you bought a track from iTunes, decide that you no longer want it, you get rid of it on Redigi and they sell it for you. So the price points are about 79 cents in the US, which is a bit cheaper than iTunes. That was reported by Music Week earlier last week, later last week. And of course, they got sued left, right, and center. EMI is the most important lawsuit that they have going at the moment, and that's being heard in the New York court this week. So there's two sides of the argument. On the one hand, you wonder whether you should have the ability to resell digital music. Of course, labels argued that the first doctrine, the first sale doctrine, which means that you are allowed in the US to sell something that you bought, it doesn't apply to digital goods because they are infinitely copyable. So there's not just one single copy that can exist at any one time. And on the other side, Redigi claims that they actually migrate the file from your computer to their server, which means that gets deleted from your computer. But of course, there's no reason why you shouldn't have copied that file 50 times before you actually uploaded it to the Redigi servers. So that it's really, on the one side you think this is a load of nonsense, and on the other side you do understand that there is some sort of argument there to be made. So Stephen, what do you reckon on would you want to resell your digital music?
Personally, I don't have any interest in reselling my digital music, but yeah. I understand that it's asking a whole lot of questions, and it's kind of, if you remember a few weeks back, there was the whole, what turned out to be rubbish was Bruce Willis was asking the question about how can I hand my files down to my kids, and when I'm gone, I want to give them my iTunes collection, and I think currently how that stands is it's illegal. It's Bruce Willis's music, and he can't pass it down to his kids. So, it's an interesting question, and this case that's going to go ahead in New York, it's kind of important, I guess. Well, some of the judgments that come out, but it's a total minefield.
Yeah,
those guys, they must have a death wish, to,
absolutely.
To even, EMI is just the start of it. It's going to be really difficult.
Yeah,
I don't think it's ever going to get off the ground. But maybe some good will come of it, or some clarity or some understanding, and we'll be in a better place because of the questions that have been asked.
Yeah. Darren, it's a fair play in terms of posing the questions. On the other side, you kind of feel like it's a bit of a kamikaze move, because it's going to be, even if it was legal, it would be really hard to make a proper business out of it, just because not that many people are probably interested in doing that. What do you reckon?
I think it is a bit. Yeah, I think as Steve said, it's an interesting case to have brought before the court as regards the impact on kind of intellectual property around digital products. Beyond that, I just think in hard terms, I just don't really understand how they can enforce it to a manner that would work. Because as you said, I could take a thing, copy it a million times on my computer, and then presumably drop it in whatever folder Redigi are going to sell from, and it deletes it, and supposedly I no longer own it.
Yeah.
When of course I do many, many times. But also I think there's just, we're at a point where music as a product, particularly around digital, piracy has just totally devalued it anyway. And therefore I wonder the degree to which people actually give a hoot for.
Yeah, I reckon it's many years too late. Kind of happened 5 years ago. It would be super interesting.
Yeah. So no, I think it's I think there is this interesting thing around, your digital persona online, your property, and what you've paid for. Because I saw a thing the other day saying that a family, I think, that had lost their daughter and couldn't get access to her Facebook account or something because a court was kind of ruling, well, it was your daughter's identity, and when she died, access to it kind of passed or something like that. It was
Yeah, sure.
very, but it again raised this kind of a question. So I think it's an interesting area, but I think as far as Redigi goes, I mean, I was just reading it and thinking of Spiral Frog and all these kind of other businesses that spent 4 or 5 years trying to get off the ground, hemorrhaging cash and getting absolutely nowhere for their troubles. So I suspect it will be that.
All right. Okay, let's leave the streaming services for a second, and we're going to have to go back to that. So it's basically a streaming services episode, but it seems like all that's in the news these days in terms of big announcements. And just talk a little bit about the OpenEMI initiative. So this week saw the release of the first OpenEMI generated app, which is a partnership between Blue Note and the Groovebug, the developer. So they brought out this really quite beautiful iPad app. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to show a screenshot of it. It's probably not going to work out very well with the reflection on the iPad, but basically it's a beautiful catalog of the Blue Note releases, and it's got a great interface. You can browse through artists, look at music bio videos, news related to the artist, reviews, re-releases. You can look at all the people that have worked on a particular record, musicians. So if you're a jazz head, then you're going to be pretty happy with that. So it's a beautiful app. The problem is that it's tied to a subscription of £1.49 per month. So that's an interesting one, because on the one side there's functionality that's replicated in the is it Blue Note, the app? Yeah, it's a Blue Note app released on Spotify, and so you'd really have to be interested just in jazz to really want to subscribe to this. And on the other side, it's an experience limited to the iPad, so that it's going to be really hard to port it to different places if you want to listen to the music in different places or cache it or anything like that. So first of all, what do you guys reckon about this particular app and the subscription model? And then we can talk a little bit about the OpenEMI initiative, maybe.
I mean, I think for me, the app as the subscription thing to me is just is a bit of a falling short, but I don't think it's their fault. I think it's merely symptomatic of the general problems we have at the moment around music and licensing. I mean, for example, we've still got this issue where if you were to use Spotify to provide the music within the app, I think the app still has to be free. Yeah. Because Spotify won't allow you to use their API and charge. And things like that are where this kind of all comes a bit unstuck. Because let's face it, if you can pay £10 a month, get the Blue Note app and shed loads of other music with Spotify, you are, of course, going to plump for that. And it has to be said, the Spotify app on the Spotify Blue Note app, rather, is the best in class, really. It's
awesome.
It's truly brilliant. And therefore, it's by no means kind of falling back on a weak alternative to use that experience if you so desired. But I just think, there's a sort of, a value attribution that's a bit wrong. I mean, I like the fact that it's a small payment. And I think the whole world of kind of micro payments and lower level subscriptions is a world that needs to be explored more, because I get a bit tired of services wanting £10 a month off me, irrespective of what they are. That just seems to be at the moment the price point everyone goes for, which doesn't stack up when you've got 10 of them and you're thinking, hang on, I'm paying £100 a month for stuff now. So I think it's good, but I just I feel for them slightly, to be honest. I suspect that given the option, they would probably much rather have charged £1.50 for the app. And have it connect through to something like Spotify, or, God, in an ideal world, your music streaming service of choice, so that you as an iPad owner globally could tap into Deezer or Audio or Spotify or whatever service you like, or even your iTunes collection potentially, I guess. But I think it probably need a streaming service to work. But you know what I mean? It's kind of this just highlights beautifully all the shortfalls of streaming music services, and indeed how they connect out to the broader music experience.
Yeah, and Stephen, of course, you're an expert on apps, and you've got some beautiful apps that you created with Mobile Roadie as well for various artists. How do you think a subscription model of this kind could work within a specific individual app, bearing in mind that a lot of the apps that you guys bring out are generally free for promotion purposes?
It's subscriptions is still, it's going to require work. It's hard. Like, even like you're talking £1.50 per month. It's not even a coffee, and people will still think long and hard before they'll spend their money. And it's just like a one-click purchase on iTunes. It's simple, but it's difficult. I've been playing around with the app. It's actually an app that I would have paid for. It's one of those kind of beautiful apps that I can see the work that's gone into it. I got a demo of it at a Music Ally EMI event, earlier this year, and like, I really like it.
Yeah.
Interestingly, though, I think if I'm correct, it's the first app that's come out of first or second app that's come out of the whole EMI, Open EMI kind of sandbox for developers. Like this kind of joint venture between EMI and developers. It's taken a long time for anything to come out of that, so that raises other questions for me. But I applaud the fact that we now have one of those kind of beautiful apps that's come out. I like it. I think like one thing that they can do is like build a big audience in this app, and then they can turn on the tap somewhere down the line if they keep giving people a reason to come back. Not just to be like a 1, 2, 3 month affair. Like, this app should evolve and grow and be like a companion or an educational experience for someone to get schooled in Blue Note, like me.
Yeah.
Like, I've learned, just been listening to some great stuff the past few days. So I hope this app evolves, and I would hate to see it just to be as is for the next year. So maybe some kind of community aspect or social features, or something else to keep people in there. But I love it.
Entertain, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, so I forgot to mention about the OpenEMI initiative. Of course, we can't give things for granted. It's an initiative that OpenEMI has established quite a while ago, whereby they would give developers access to sandboxes, like Stephen mentioned, of pre-cleared music, artwork, and the works, basically, in regards to specific artists and specific genres, where the developers can go wild and create whatever they see fit and just create a great experience. And then if they want to bring that to a commercial level, they can go back to EMI and start negotiating on that front. And if everything works out, like in this case, then the app can come out and be something that is going to make money for both the developer and EMI and the artists involved. So it's a great initiative, but of course, as Steven mentioned, it's taken a long time for the first app to come out. It's just a case of seeing whether there's been a lot of stuff in the works, and maybe we're going to see like a number of apps coming out in the next 2 or 3 months that have been in the works for a while, or whether this is a one-off and there's still a lot of work to be done on more.
Like what we've seen sorry, Darren, on the Spotify, when they launched their, they had a kind of whole raft of apps.
Yeah.
They kind of trickled out like a hand curated selection of like 10 apps.
Yeah.
But then, from what I believe and what I was told, that there was like hundreds of apps already ready to go before they opened the floodgates. So they wanted the experience to be nice, a curated experience. And again, Spotify, for me, they've kind of shown how to do it.
Yeah.
And I hope EMI have a ton of cool stuff in the pipeline, and then it will lead other labels to do more interesting stuff. Because I can see like joint ventures being just a quicker way to accelerate people like building innovative products on tablets. Because another thing that I've been kind of rattling on about for a while is we've not seen a lot of tablet based things in music. Like, how long has the iPad been out? And I could probably count on these two hands like the amount of really brilliant music apps that I've seen. So there's interesting questions around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my side, it'd be interesting to see what comes. I mean, I do remember, and I think I mentioned on a previous podcast, that my understanding from talking with people was that there was a sort of certain degree of developer trust that needed to happen, and that there was a sort of natural wariness of among developers to kind of go in with this because of, I think, a fear that big evil major label might take their idea off them and screw them over. But I have to say, I mean, I think EMI for quite a while now have shown an incredibly kind of forward-thinking and open attitude where their, technical development goes and things like that. I think they've actually been quite an open book, in that respect. And I have to say, now that obviously Universal are going to get them, I just sincerely hope that this initiative is, doesn't just continue, but is also allowed to blossom further, within Universal to include Universal's properties, because it really did stand apart. I mean, I know that Island Def Jam did the same sort of thing, but I think it was so restricted in the sense of the catalogue. Whereas EMIs, as we're seeing with this, they're very much looking at everything they've got catalogue-wise and seeing how they can, bring that together into these kind of experiences. So, I kind of wish them well with it in that sense. That, I really hope that they continue to support this initiative when they're sort of folded into Universal, and that great things come of it.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to talking about licensing quickly. So something that came out yesterday again, lots of stuff came out yesterday because it was SF Music Tech, so I think a lot of people reserved press releases to Monday and Tuesday just to make some impact in the news. So one thing that came out is the fact that Getty Images has partnered with SoundCloud to offer the ability to artists to license their music via the Getty Images ecosystem, and so make some money off their music if they so wish, and be part of the Getty catalog, so that if people are looking for stuff for their particular project, then they can easily find this track and decide to use it. So it's a super interesting development. I think is going to have a lot of artists jumping on board, especially unsigned artists and smaller bands. And I was just looking at the rate card. Basically the Getty Images model is if you're not familiar with it, is something that allows people to license a track based on the use that they're going to have. The price is fixed. The price is relatively low compared to industry standards if you want to get commercial music into your project. So it makes it a lot easier to get the music onto your project and make commercial music, licensed music, legally licensed music available in your project without fear of being sued or anything like that. So the rates go from about £50 from what I can see, which is the minimum for podcast audio-only programming use, to up to I think the max I can see here on the rate card on Getty Images is about £3,000 for film theatrical release. So on the one side it's great. On the other side, artists should be a little bit wary about where they are in their career development, because there is a good chance that if they are above a certain level, they could probably license their track for a film theatrical release for worldwide use, perpetual rights, for a hell of a lot more than £3,000. So what do you reckon, Darren?
I think it's it's a tricky one. I'm trying not to be a little cynical about it. I mean, I think there's many services out there that offer this kind of thing. Yeah. And in my experience, kind of working with artists and whatnot, it's about getting through to be chosen to be on, to be used in one manner or another. I mean, admittedly, in the context of mine, I suppose you are talking about slightly higher end syncs and everything else, but it's good. It's sort of good, easy money, really. If you get picked up for a use in a US TV show or something, then it's a lovely, payment for really not doing a great deal beyond licensing, as opposed to touring, where obviously there's a lot of physical effort and everything else involved. So it kind of works well in that sense. But I think, I think with all these things, I worry slightly about the sort of volume and quality aspects. And weirdly, it brings to mind People Sound, which when I worked at Sony in sort of 98 to 2001, People Sound was very much kind of launched as a pre-MySpace, where all unsigned bands could be, right, for A&R people to find it. But really what turned out quite rapidly was that it just turned into a massive kind of junk heap of stuff that was kind of, you couldn't navigate through it. And so immediately it lost value because there was just too much there, and it choked itself out. And I worry that to some extent that you might find the same happening here. It's lovely that the stuff is there, and it's a great angle for SoundCloud to say, well, we can now connect with a licenser to make your music available in this way. But the degree to which it will get used and deployed is a slightly different matter. And I think around music, it's less to do with platforms like SoundCloud and more to do with artists and music and how they choose to sync their music. Because, if you look at, I think TuneCore now has a publishing element to it where you can upload your music there for this sort of thing. There's another service called Q Songs, which is backed by Peter Gabriel, run by the guy that used to run Real World Records, and like a very good service. And the reason I quite like that one is because you can upload your music quite easily to it, but they're a bit more selective, and I think they've got more of that musical nous around what they're trying to put together. And the deals they put together, the idea is that you specify what they're pre-cleared for, I suppose. So you can say, look, using it on this, this, and this, that's fine. Anything above that, we need, approval and so on. But they feel a bit more qualitative because they're much more sort of there, things like Q Songs are there to, select this stuff and make things happen. Whereas I just think when you've got, a mass model like this, where you're connecting one gigantic catalogue of SoundCloud's music to an equally gigantic service, it feels like something where it's great PR for those involved, but, and it's a nice angle for artists. I don't think it's like a massive game changer. I think it's one more avenue available for people, and that's good. Don't get me wrong, that's a good thing. But in real terms, it's just one more of many.
Yeah, and Stephen, maybe like the positive angle that we can take away from that is that Getty Images has always been known for being able to allow people that wouldn't normally be able to license music to actually get into that game at a significantly lower price point. So maybe that's an angle that people can take away from this, is that this is not aimed at Warner Brothers or some huge companies going in and trying to find something, but maybe at the local church group that's got a video out or something like that might want some music, and they might have a little bit more access to higher quality music on that front. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think it's it's positive, and like there's no commercial incentive there for SoundCloud, so they're not making any money out of it. So it's it's cool. I think the guys at Q Songs have done a fantastic job of I met Ed Averdiek, who is the CEO, and he's like, the experience of Q Songs is really nice. So like I'm kind of coming back to what Darren's point is, like, to filter or to find stuff on SoundCloud for that kind of experience, there's no way currently. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, but Q Songs have been an interesting entrant over the past year. And like it's just going to make things easier and more accessible and less daunting. Because that whole licensing world, it's not something I know a whole lot about or ever want to kind of get bogged down in it. I know it's not easy. So it's a welcome move for me.
Definitely. And if the listeners want to check out more about Q Songs as well, they can check out episode 98, where I had an interview with Ed about the service. So if they want to follow through with that, definitely check out the website, and it's episode 98. I was just thinking of what to end with now. Actually, a couple more stories. The first one is just talking quickly about Last.fm. So it's been pretty quiet on their end in the last 3 or 4 months. I haven't heard much happening, and the report from the 2011 sort of earnings is that they have a 4.4 million pounds pre-tax loss. So the revenues have stagnated, and growth in the US actually has gone backwards, has reduced a little bit, whilst growth in the UK has actually gone up. So that's some interesting figures coming out of that. Last.fm is a company that has kind of unfortunately came in too early to actually be a really strong player in the streaming field. Now they've really positioned themselves as a data company on the one side, and also as a streaming company, but in regards to more quirky, unsigned, there's not, the big artists are not on there. Let's just say that. So what are your thoughts on Last.fm right now? I really believe that they have a huge play to make on the data front, and maybe it's just been hard to monetize it as of yet. But they really have the repository of your personal listening history if you've been scrobbling for your life of digital music. So there's really got to be something that they can make from that to really create a new value service. What do you reckon, Stephen?
It's a tough one. Like I've been a long time subscriber or a user of Last.fm.
Yeah.
less so over the past, couple of years, but I'm still scrobbling everything back there.
Exactly.
So like there is, like as you said, there's a huge value there, and like they've got my my scrobbles from every different service that I've been on. That's the one thing that combined all them together is Last FM. So that's what's interesting for me. The losses are like frightening.
Yeah.
It's serious money. But they've got a smart team there. I think they just need to do stuff soon, and I'm sure they know that. Like, what do I know? But it's all in the data. Data is oil, as some people say, and that's what Last FM have. So I hope, I wish them well. They're around the corner from us here in London, and let's see what maybe
what happens.
Darren has like more points on that.
Yeah, sure.
I think I've got to watch what I say. I'll be honest. I think Last FM is a phenomenal team of people being choked to death by their rather overbearing corporate behemoth owners. Last FM is getting the same treatment that Flickr did at the hands of Yahoo. I know that CBS just don't seem to see the value of Last FM's data.
Yeah.
Everything I've seen about Last FM relates to live events and trying to sell ads, and it's a terrible misunderstanding of what the core value of that service is.
Yeah.
And I feel incredibly sympathetic towards the guys that are there, because as Steve said, we all move in these circles, like Steve, I know plenty of people there, and they are an incredibly sharp bunch of people, but I think they're just getting throttled by their American owners at this point. And genuinely, I start to worry that they're literally not going to be happy until Last FM has been reduced to something so small that they can uproot it and park it in New York with all of their other properties.
Yeah.
So I think it's just such a shame. And I think the exit of Matt Horn from the company really flew a huge flag there on kind of, I would guess to be exasperation with this sort of deadlock with their owner. I think it's a crying shame. And it was interesting. I was in Dublin on the weekend for the Hard Working Class Heroes event, and I met someone there from a company called Soundwave, I think it's called. And it's a new service. It's an Android app coming, and it has Last FM squarely in its sights. Now, they were saying to me that one feature they've got of what they're doing, very similar thing. So your music gets, well, you can't use the term scrobbled because Last FM have trademarked it, but it gets pushed back to their service.
Yeah.
And what the difference is that with Soundwave, you get like almost a map interface that would allow me to, draw a circle around Brooklyn in New York, and it would show me what all the people in Brooklyn are listening to, but in a very kind of, lovely interface in a manner that's really conducive to enjoying it more.
Yeah.
And these are all things that Last FM could do in no time at all.
And they have done similar stuff, but maybe not. They have
just
like
not within
local
their own
charts.
service. They're done as a kind of. I mean, funny enough, I was saying this to a developer yesterday, and he said, "Oh, we built something like that," but it was done as a branded tie-up with, I don't know, someone like Eurostar or Copperberg or something. But it was done as a sort of exercise elsewhere. But these are the things that should be a very fundamental part of Last FM's music app, and everything else. So I just feel incredibly sad and sorry for them, because I think they really are sharp guys.
Absolutely.
And they've got a pretty buoyant business model. I mean, we should not forget that for whatever their last 12 months of finances look like, that is a company that's been around for what 10 or more years.
It's
now.
probably one of the oldest companies in digital music.
It's like the granddaddy of tech companies, and therefore, these guys, I think they deserve more. So I mean, in a weird way, I must confess, I'd live in hope that CBS will just man up and sell them to someone that would take care of them properly.
Yeah.
Because at the minute they're in something of a strange battered wife relationship with their owners.
Yeah.
And it's quite sad and horrible to see. So I'd love it to turn around. Will it? I don't know. As we've seen elsewhere, Yahoo have certainly not dispensed with services like Flickr. They still have, for whatever the balance is, they're still churning a lot of figures and everything else. And just as, where MySpace, prior to being on the comeback trail, was very much toxic as a brand, it was still churning a phenomenal number of, unique figures a month, such that just as an ad platform, it was pretty good,
Yeah, sure.
And Last FM's in a similar spot. But yeah, it's a sad tale for me. I really do feel for them.
And I mean, I've been thinking about, in the last like 2 or 3 months, I've been thinking a lot about sort of digital legacies and sort of how you transmit the way that you, I think we may have talked about this before, how you transmit what you were as a digital music listener to people that might be interested in the future. Or
It sounds like you're doing up your wheel, Andrea.
kind of, yeah, weird. But no, even for a personal perspective, if in 10, 15 years I want to go and check out what I was listening to on different services, I think that there's a huge play for a company to come in and really take that space in a way that allows you to explore your personal listening history and access it in a way that maybe like ties in with Spotify, or in a way that ties in with another service, so that you know what you were listening to in 2002, 2005, 2007, and you can go back to that, or you can say, oh, I had a really awesome party that I made this playlist for 10 years ago, and you can go back to that, and there's no real service that is going to allow you to do that yet. Last.fm is probably the best the company that's best positioned to provide something like that, and I think that would be really valuable, but that's probably just me.
Well, I have I reckon something to do with our phones. Our phones like know what's going on inside these phones, so maybe Apple and Google are working on those type of things.
Yeah.
Because when you I can go back in 5 years and see a photo that I took, and I can see where I took it and what time I took it. So the data is there somewhere. Last.fm is a great example in music. Amazon, as they kind of roll out all their products, they have like music, books, video, apps, and like God knows what next. So they record all of that. So it's a great question, and I reckon the phone will be an interesting one like in the future. Like
Absolutely.
I think you're seeing it. There's apps like Memento and that one that Gina Trapani created that you install on a server that pretty much siphons off your tweets and your Facebook stuff and allows you to sort of slice and dice in a big data kind of way. But interestingly, I've not actually seen any of them try and pull in music. And you're right that Last.fm is far and away the most obvious. And I remember Matt Horn saying at one point that if Facebook is your social graph of stuff you like in a social sense, then Last.fm is your music graph. And I don't know, like Last.fm just make me want to bang my head on the table, because I just think there are infinite opportunities they've had. They could have had, imagine, like just as you land on a website and you got a Facebook like button, what if you had the same for Last.fm and you went to websites and then you had, an equivalent to Facebook Connect. So if you landed on the NME, it would tailor your news according to your musical graph. All of this stuff could have been done, and God, it could have been done 3 or 4 years ago. And it just hasn't happened. And I don't know why, but
Let's say that.
It's a shame.
Yeah, let's leave it at that. Okay, last story that I want to talk about, again, it was announced yesterday, is Pandora. So Pandora has announced quite a surprise, actually, announcement that they actually started disclosing the amounts that they're paying to artists. So this is all part of a play that Pandora has at the moment, because they have this bill that's going through Congress. I'm just trying to find the name of it. It's a bipartisan bill that is basically an Internet Radio Fairness Act that would allow Congress to diminish the amount of royalties that Pandora has to pay for the performance rights of the tracks. The argument of Pandora is that a company like SiriusXM, for example, is paying less than 10% of the revenue as music royalties, whilst Pandora is paying upwards of 50% of their net income. So they see that as a big drawback, as something that is not only drawing back them, but it's also drawing back smaller startups that might want to enter that space. And I think the reasoning behind releasing these numbers is that they wanted to show that there is a real market behind this, and that even Pandora, being a huge company that they are struggling with the royalties, and never mind a new young startup that wants to enter this radio streaming space. So the numbers are these. There's a few artists that are earning over $1 million each, including Coldplay, Adele, Wiz Khalifa, and there's artists that are earning upwards of they're approaching $3 million annually of income from Pandora on the performance side, which are Drake and Lil Wayne were mentioned. And there's also a whole slew of middle income artists that are earning anything between $10,000 and $100,000 to $100,000, which is really to Tim Westengreen blog post that links are in the show notes, is the idea of creating a new middle class in music that also includes maybe independent artists that are discovered by Pandora and that actually end up making meaningful incomes through that service. So on the one side, it's great that they've released this figure. On the other side, I'm kind of thinking, why would you release the fact that you've paid over £1 million or you're paying £100,000 to an artist if your objective in Congress is to diminish that amount by upwards of 40%? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure that their play is not to get it diminished by 40%. I'm sure they probably want to try and find the middle ground and get it diminished substantially so that they can become a profitable company. But on the other side, it seems like a weird play. Okay, I understand that they want to get people to realize that there's a market there, and there's other company that might be wanting to get into it, but they can't because of the constraints on the streaming front. But on the other side, you're kind of saying, oh yeah, I'm paying you like $2 million this year, but if this act comes in next year, I'm gonna pay you like 700,000 or 800,000. Yeah, it's kind of weird. What do you reckon?
I just found the whole thing rather baffling.
Yeah.
It's kind of, why do you sit there and go, as you said, I think you just nailed it. It's kind of, why you're telling everyone you paid them loads of money and then simultaneously undertaking quite an aggressive battle to ensure that you do not pay them anywhere near that going forward. So I don't really know what the point of it was. It was kind of, here's loads of money, which if we get our way, we won't be paying to you again. I mean, very strange. And also I'm getting, I've always got a relatively well-tuned bullshit filter when it comes to press releases, particularly when they come from the companies in question, and are not shot through a bit of a critical eye of perhaps your notable journalists of choice. But I think it was Glenn Peoples at Billboard made an excellent point when he said, everyone's talking about them paying the artists $2 million.
Yeah.
I suspect what they mean is they've paid the label $2 million. I think the artists probably don't get anywhere near that. I must admit, I'm not massily well versed in the story. I think partly because it's American
and it's new as well. I mean, it literally came out overnight, so
it's not a world I'm as well versed with as regards mechanicals. But I have seen other people mention that performers were getting a lot more than songwriters for some reason. I don't know if that's true. I don't know what the setup.
Yeah, I saw Justin Kalifowitz posted something on Twitter last night. To the same effect that the royalties paid to songwriters are a pittance compared to what is claimed that is being paid to performers. So that's definitely a divide there.
It's a funny one. I don't really understand what they're trying to get out of that by winning people over with a massive press release that will, if they are successful, diminish by a very significant amount.
And Stephen, are you impressed by the numbers? Like I found them really.
I'm surprised by the numbers, but let's see what other people write in the coming days. There's going to be some interesting observations from folks in the industry that I respect, and we'll see what they have to say. I think in 10 days' time we'll be able to look back and reflect
on what happened. I think there's going to be some pissed off labels as well, because the fact that these figures have been published means that a lot of artists are going to look really hard into their accountings and work out how much of the figures that are reported actually ended up in their pockets, right?
I'm sure Elton John is on it as we speak.
It's funny though. I think you're absolutely right. There is. I guarantee someone out there is going to call in the auditors and someone will start a bun fight over why they've been charged for packaging and breakages on digital stream or something. Yeah, it's weird. I just think this is one of these where they've rolled out big numbers. Everyone initially has gone, woo, amazing, and
then the questions start to come out.
Yeah, I think over the next few days there'll be some analysis and some kickback on it that will potentially be something of a backfire for them, but we'll see.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to look further into the digital music broadcast royalties side, there's actually a really good paper published by Brookings, which is by John Villasenor, who has published a Digital Music Broadcast Royalties, the Case for a Level Playing Field paper, which is really exhaustive and really long, so you have to actually be very interested in this to want to read it all. but I'm going to post the link in the show notes so that you can have a look if you'd like to. All right, well, I think we're coming up to the end, just to do a wrap. I just wanted to ask Stephen if there's anything you wanted to plug, any apps that Mobile Radio has come out with that you'd like the listeners to check out.
We've been launching apps we've been constantly doing some big ones over the last few months. Things like Red Hot Chili Peppers, Green Day.
Awesome.
Block Party done a cool app with some kind of custom integration, which I love. I love when people build stuff on top of the mobile roadie platform.
Yeah.
Yas launched an app for The Darkness with some augmented reality to kind of brings the album to life. So
that's great.
those type of things, like that have that like kind of bit of a buzz or a hook are always interesting for me, or a game, or like we know the stuff that's in our platform works really well, like the engagement tools and the analytics and the social stuff that fans seem to want, and it brings people back. Married with interesting integrations like the Block Party weather app that they came up with, and these other things that we're working on. So you're going to see more of that from Mobile Roadie integrations and that stuff. One other thing I wanted to plug was that I've seen over the past couple of days was the guys at Topspin have been working with the Bones Brigade, the legendary skateboard team back in the day, and they've like created they've done this, they kind of crowdsourced Instagram photos from their fans and their audience.
Awesome.
And so if you go to the bonesbrigade.com now, you're going to get a really nice Topspin experience of like all these kind of great bundles, from like stickers right up to go for lunch and skateboard with Tony Hawk and Stacey Peralta. So it's an interesting one for me. I love Topspin guys. So bonesbrigade.com.
And it's definitely something that Ian Rogers would have wanted to be top notch, because he's well into his skateboarding. So
he's a skateboarding man,
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Absolutely. All right, and Darren, anything you want to plug?
Well, I would say I was at this Hard Working Class Heroes thing over the last weekend, and there were some really good panels there, very interesting speakers, and a lot going on. So certainly, if you go to, I think it's hwch.net, they'll be posting videos up of all those panels in the next couple of weeks, I think. So there's some really good bits to go on there, and certainly I took part in a great panel to do with kind of future of technologies and whether stuff is actually kind of cutting through and all these kinds of things, with some really good guys on the panel, awesome, including Soundwave and Dev from the Hype Machine, and Will from yours truly, who do some really good video work stateside. So really good. And yeah, I mean, just as an event, I thought it was great to go over and be part of a very positive thing where there's shed loads of Irish bands.
And how was the Guinness? How was the Guinness?
The Guinness flowed freely and plentifully.
And expensively.
Yeah, there was that as well, especially when you can no longer book it to your employer. Because now my employer is me. But no, it was lovely. I mean, it was just great. It's somewhere I would recommend everyone goes to, and I think it's really jumped up to be probably my favourite music event of the year, just because there's a lot of, there's a very passionate music scene over there, and I think it's lovely when, I think often music events like Meedem or even, Great Escape in the UK are very much about a bunch of different bands from all over the world coming to play, and they're there because they're buzzy and things like that. Whereas I think the difference with Hard Working Class Heroes is that the connecting point between them all is just that they are Irish bands. And I have to also actually give a mention, even though this isn't a tech thing, but it was the singularly most inspiring thing I saw all weekend. I had to do speed panels where kids could come in, artists and all sorts, and get advice from people like myself on kind of digital marketing or, music supervisors, label people, everything. And a pair of kids came in, and they were very much kids, and they sat down on the Friday, and I thought they were wearing matching clothes as some sort of fashion thing, because I was a little hungover and not quite on the ball. Of course, they were school kids, still in uniform, who travelled in from somewhere quite significantly far away from Dublin for the day, having been let out of school. 15 years old, both of them, and they were organising they're doing a thing whereby basically they ship bands out from Dublin. So obviously a lot of the bands gravitate to Dublin. They get bands to go out and play in their local schools. Nice. And they effectively, all the school kids go and watch the gig, and then if the band are well received, they put on another gig at another school, and then some of the kids from that school will go, but also a load of kids from the other school can attend and everything else. And the whole idea was just to try and, boost the local scene in areas where bands basically wouldn't even think to go and play. Now, I'm not a geographical expert on Ireland, leave that to Steve, but it's, talking with them and everything else. These kids are 15 years old and they're doing stuff like that. And I thought that was just awesome. Amazing, it's not a tech thing, but I was kind of looking at them thinking these are sort of kids are probably going to be like the next Ian Hogarth or something, because they are getting a whole thing going on in live music in these super localized areas, but also giving very new bands the chance to go out and kind of refine their live chops, if you like, and things like that.
Amazing.
So of all the things I saw, there were so many tech things.
That's great.
And it was a pair of 15-year-old kids from a very rural area of Ireland that kind of blew my mind. So I wanted to mention it just because they really left a lasting impression. I thought it was great.
Just quickly
Fantastic.
on that, I think the whole school, bands playing schools is like, it's undervalued.
Yeah.
I've worked with bands back in Ireland, and some of them done like mini school tours, and like you can pull a crowd of 700 13-year-old kids, that like can be definite fans and like can become customers.
Yeah.
So
and in the US, it's something
that
in the US it's something that definitely they value. The school tours are huge for some bands to build up a following. So it's kind of strange that we don't have this quite the same thing here in the UK.
It gets more kids into music as well.
Yeah.
You think that these. I mean, how much do brands pay to reach kids of 15 to 20 years old? Because they're the ones with, big disposable incomes, a lot of time on their hands, and they buy a huge variety of products.
Yeah.
And these are the kids that, to be a bit more hard-nosed and cynical, win them over at 15 and they'll become fans of your band, presumably for a good 10 years and stuff. So I just thought it was genius. It's like all the great ideas in the world. It was incredibly simple.
And effective.
Yeah, effective. So all power to them. I thought it was amazing.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a wrap. Thanks so much for joining me on the show. And to the listeners, I'm going to post the Twitter handles of these guys on the show notes and also on the credits. And please visit digitalmusicrants.com if you need more information in case you've stumbled across this podcast on YouTube or on Stitcher or in some random places that are not directly related to it. Thanks a lot for listening.
Au revoir.
Cheers, guys.
Digital music.